Good evening. Today we'll talk about the historic friendship pacts between Israel, Bahrain, and the UAE. And like others, I'm also hopeful that these pacts will bring lasting peace in the most troubled region on the planet. So I'm having two of my friends, very prominent journalists. I'm having Ahdeya Ahmed. She is from Bahrain and she is also president of Bahraini Journalist Association. My other friend with me, he is a Middle East, he covers Middle East for I-24 News Israel. He is Adi from Jerusalem. Welcome both of you.
Thank you.
So I will like to start with Hadiya. How's the mood on the streets of Bahrain?
Well, we had a meeting with the Minister of Foreign Affairs this morning as journalists, and it was an amazing meeting. It showed how Bahrain, on the official level, is celebrating and happy about this historical event. But we, on the human level, also on the public level, the Bahraini Parliament is strongly supporting this historic decision. The people of Bahrain are very happy. We are waiting. We were actually even asking questions today about when are the other agreements going to be signed when it comes to aviation, trade, because we're looking forward to establishing ties now on the lower level than the leadership level. So no, the atmosphere is great. We are happy. Let's not forget the fact that this country has been made up of so many components. Bahrain has had a Jewish community for decades. They've had Christian community for decades. Within 1 kilometers of land, you can see a mosque, you can see a synagogue, you can see a church, and you can see a Buddhist and Hinduist temple. And this is what we have always believed in. But today, on the political level, everything we believed in got materialized. Politically, now we see that we are part of the Middle East, and because we're part of the Middle East, this historic agreement also now involves our friends in Israel into building relations with us.
Great. And how's the mood there in Israel? Because I'm getting the news that Israel is already in a lockdown because of coronavirus. So what's the mood on the streets?
Well, at the beginning, of course, the mood was very festive. The idea of different Gulf countries accepting Israel as part of the region was quite shaken for many Israelis. However, you are right, there is a lockdown approaching, and it is New Year's Eve in the Jewish calendar. So most of the public in Israel is really quite mentally busy with the fact that there is a lockdown approaching. The instructions and the regulations exactly are still not completely clear. And this seems like this is the main issue on the mind of the public. However, if you do go ahead and ask Israeli citizens out in the street, what do they feel about it? I think everyone will pretty much agree that this is very much an historic moment. People are very curious about Gulf countries. They have seen them on the internet, in television. They have heard about them in media, but it always seemed like a very far-fetched area that will maybe never be arrived by Israelis. And now, all of a sudden, this paradigm has changed, and Israelis are very much looking forward to going to Bahrain and to the UAE. You can see it on Facebook very much. A lot of people are asking when there will be flights, when will the relations actually develop and take place, and people are waiting for this. We do have to remember that this depends very much on the coronavirus and when the sky
Yeah.
opens. Generally.
I think with the historical pact signed between United Arab Emirates, Israel, and Bahrain, you will have the track three diplomacy also because with the previous countries like Jordan and Egypt, you had G2G relation, government to government. It was, you can say, type 1 and type 2 diplomacy. But now it will be, I'm optimistic that people to people relationship will also foster between UAE, Israel, and Bahrain because the type of society you are having there, the cultural influences, it's a melting pot. Though both the countries are melting pots. So I'm optimistic. And since I'm from India, we are friends of Bahrain. Our Prime Minister Narendra Modi ji was given the highest civilian award, and we are also friends of Israel. Actually, Air India flight was the first flight in the world which got direct access from Saudi Arabia to Jerusalem, Delhi, by using Saudi airspace directly to Jerusalem. So we are friends of both. Rather, we are friends of Israel, UAE, as well as Bahrain. So we are looking very optimistically that things will progress, and all the countries will show a brotherly feeling, a friendly feeling, a family feeling, and that's how the world must be. But tell me one thing, Eddie, how you look at the development vis-a-vis Palestinian issue?
Well, I think it seems like in Israel, the focus is mainly right now on the agreement between Israel and the Gulf countries, and it's not so much spoken in the public sphere in Israel about how it will affect the relations with the Palestinians. We have to remember that Benjamin Netanyahu is a right-wing based prime minister, and his main ticket was, at least for several months, an annexation of the West Bank. So on one hand, there is a change of the paradigm right now, and these agreements with Arab countries are totally a turn of 180 degrees in the paradigm and not annexing parts of the West Bank. However, Netanyahu still can't afford himself to go towards a negotiation with the Palestinians, as so much of his base is against these sorts of negotiations. And this was quite surprising, I think, for many people in the Israeli public, the fact that the Palestinian issue is even on the table as part of these agreements. We do have to remember, however, that even in previous peace agreements that Israel did with Egypt and Jordan, they both consist of parts that refer to the Palestinian issue and promise that it will be taken care of. And this didn't happen until today. So I think a lot of the Israeli public is presuming that it's not binding and committing as much as the rest of the peace agreement. And in a way, I think the public is closing its eyes when it comes to the Palestinian issue, something that has become quite common in Israel during the last 2 decades, somewhat of almost ignoring the Palestinian issue. And we can even say that during the signing of the agreements, there were rockets being launched from the Gaza Strip as some sort of a reminder that the Palestinians are very present, very much here. And yet most of the Israeli public still pays its attention to the agreement in Washington and not so much to the rockets landing in southern Israel and not to the situation in the West Bank and the Gaza Strip.
Just for my knowledge, I'm asking you, can Benny Gantz be a bridge between Palestinians and Benjamin Netanyahu?
It seems like Netanyahu is focusing mainly on trying to get Benny Gantz outside of the political system, and Gantz is trying to have his way to the mainstream of the Israeli public. So since the Palestinian issue is so controversial, Benny Gantz wouldn't risk himself politically by trying to bridge between the Palestinians and the Israeli public, let alone between the Palestinians and Benjamin Netanyahu.
Ahdeya, what's the talk in the Arab community in UAE and Bahrain, the Palestinian issue?
First of all, Doctor, first of all, let me just start with something. We have always believed in human rights, okay? One of the most things that on the human level used to upset me that when we travel and if you're in a lift and going from a floor to another, someone would talk to you and say, "Where are you from?" And you would say, "Bahrain." And then you would obviously look at them and say, "Where are you from?" And then they look at you with hesitation and they say, "You will not talk to me if I talk to you, if I tell you where I'm from." And I would say, "No, it's okay, just tell me." And they would hesitantly say Israel. And I used to always feel bad about that because you cannot have a whole population feel isolated or outcasted. If we speak about human rights, then there is also another violation of human rights there when people fear to say where they come from. So as a child and as I grew up, I saw things that I did not like, okay? I believe in the Palestinian cause, in the Palestinian issue, but this does not mean that I ignore also the human rights of the Israelis who are at a threat by Hezbollah at any moment. So if we want to speak humanity, we have to look at each and every player in this game. There are children who have paid their lives on both sides, and we have reached the stage that we want to be role players in bringing peace. There is nothing wrong with sitting and having a dialogue. We never had a problem with Israel. Israel wasn't a country that was in war with us. Today, we want to get more involved politically. We are practicing our sovereignty as a nation. We have the right to sign an agreement. Mohammed bin Zayed, in a telephone call with Prime Minister Netanyahu, Prime Minister Netanyahu agreed that they will stop the annexation of land, and I believe that this is a good start. I believe there is no way that anything bad can come out of a peace agreement.
Yes.
I feel that there is no way back. There is only one way forward. And I feel that Israel also, as a state and as people, have for many years exerted efforts into becoming closer to the Gulf countries. And if this shows anything, it shows a good intention. Even if you have a problem with someone, if that person with that problem tries to reach out to you, it means that they want to listen to you, they want to talk to you. So why not open a door? And I think that this week Bahrain and UAE opened a huge door. Now, irrespective of who is against this or with this decision, I have a few explanations of why some people are against it. First of all, there are people whose loyalty and dedication is to Hezbollah, and they are terrorists. So people with that issue are never gonna accept that. Now they know, Hezbollah knows that their next door biggest threat is now an ally of the Gulf countries. So this means that this could be this beginning of the end of Hezbollah in Lebanon, which means stability for Lebanon. Now we go back to Iran. Iran has been our enemy since 1979. That's 3 days ago, Iran got a slap on its face. The Muslim Brotherhood, another another case of, again, internationally labeled terrorists. These guys are never going to be happy. They are going to ruin everything that we are trying to do.
Yes.
And to be fair, there are also people who are holding on to old beliefs and old thoughts and the old school of what nationalism is all about. Okay, to me, nationalism is to love your country and other countries and to see moms not lose their children, a woman sitting in
Yes.
her house in Israel or Palestine not worried about something happening. So there will be people who will always be against it, but Bahrain's people, and I speak on behalf of people around me. I represent around 600 journalists here, and from the reaction I see from the journalists, and when I switch on my TV, my national TV, I see the smile on the face of our TV presenters. I see the columns our columnists are writing. I feel good about it because I know that this is how Bahrainis are. Now, other people who want to hold on to slogans and are emotional and want to hold on to the old way, they are the same people who have been where they were 70 years ago and they want to stay for
Yes.
another 70 years here. It's a trait for many people also from the Palestinian side. They have been using this cause as a trade. And there are also, let's not forget, the ideologies that can never be changed. And I don't believe that I should look back at people in their 60s and 70s when I have a generation of people in their 20s who want to live and who want a better future. So I'm very happy. The alternative we had now is a very good alternative, but I'd like to clear something. And Eddie, that is for you. For people who have this perception that we signed this agreement because it's just Iran is a threat, this is not true. We signed this agreement because we want to have a relationship with Israel. Now, if with that agreement it means that I give a slap on the face of my enemy, why not? But it doesn't take away that Bahrain signed this agreement with Israel because it wants its relations with Israel as a country.
Uh, this is a nationalistic approach as well as
Yeah,
human approach. You talked on both the issues. You talked about your national issue and as well as human issues, because when you were talking about a Palestinian mom losing her kid or a Israeli lady losing her kid, that's a human issue. Everybody has a right to live on this planet. Planet belongs to everybody. It belongs to all of us, and we all are human beings. And human beings should not fight against one another. So peace is always a welcome thing, and it should be propagated. And it's nice you guys are doing friendship. Uh, I want to ask you, Ahdeya, on something more political now. What about Saudi
action.
Arabia? Uh,
But
what about the Saudi Arabia? Was Saudi involved in the background in this deal? Because when Bahrain or UAE are signing, then I think on the backstage there is presence of Saudi Arabia. What do you think?
Well, I don't have information about that, and I wouldn't like to speak on behalf of Saudi Arabia. They have their own people, they have their own politics, they have their own the role that they are playing in the region. So I don't want to sit and analyze what's happening in the background. I like to talk about facts more than just an analysis. So I do believe that there will be other countries joining the peace deals in our region in probably in the next coming weeks. Those countries will be, we don't have an idea. We have, of course, there are predictions going on, but I believe that this will further strengthen our approach towards what's going on in the Middle East. Any country in the Middle East that will join this agreement, it makes us stronger. It makes our message stronger. Saudi has always been supportive to different causes all around the world. And I'm sure that the Saudi stance, whatever it will be, it will continue to be an honorable stance. I'm a journalist, so I can answer diplomatically too.
That was very diplomatic to a very interesting question.
And I am a politician, so I will try to go political in my
Go
questioning.
as much as you want.
So, Eddie, you tell me so how it will affect the political stature of Bibi.
That's a very big question. The political situation of Netanyahu is an issue that has been occupying Israel for a decade now. And this agreement is definitely very dramatic, very
Let me
historic. Maybe
interrupt.
one of
Let me interrupt.
Netanyahu's.
We always believe that Bibi has got 10 lives.
That's you're underestimating him. There are journalists in Israel that made their living by predicting when will Netanyahu fall, and they have been doing that for a decade now. Of course, nobody is immortal, but Netanyahu in the Israeli political system is maybe the strongest politician that has been for such a long period in years. And many different things that happened during the last few years didn't affect much his stand, even not being on trial and being accused in court, in the Israeli court, for bribery and fraud. That didn't affect Netanyahu's political situation. So I think we can assume that this peace agreement will, of course, improve his situation a little bit. But when you look at the Israeli political system, we had three election systems during the last year and a half. And what's interesting is that in none of them there were any dramatic changes. It was always
Yes,
50% and
always same.
50% to the different political camps in Israel. And Netanyahu's political status didn't change much. I think that the things that can affect Netanyahu a lot more than this agreement is the way he treats coronavirus and inner affairs in Israel. Eventually, I think, like in any country, politics is determined by much more by inner affairs than by foreign policy. Of course, this will be something that Netanyahu will use politically in the next elections that will probably happen during the next 6 months, as it happens in Israel. But I don't think it will shake the political system completely.
Okay, tell me what is the reaction of extreme right-wing parties vis-a-vis not annexating the West Bank, like parties like Yamina Party or Benutu Party, Libertdsman Party. How are they reacting?
Well, it changes from party to party. Most of the parties support this agreement because it really shows a paradigm that demonstrates that Israel can be part of the region, part of the Middle East, and a close ally to Muslim Sunni countries, which is really a change in the state of mind. And this is something that the right wing in Israel has been preaching for years, not giving away territories or parts of what they see as Israel in order to be accepted in the region. So in a way, this is very convenient for some right-wing parties. However, parties that represent the settlers who see the annexation of the West Bank as their main goal are, of course, very disappointed from this. Some of them are very close political allies of Netanyahu, and these aren't just people who are in the political system. These could be settlers' representatives or heads of
Hmm.
municipalities in the West Bank, and they feel completely betrayed by Netanyahu because for 6 months he has been promising them that their dreams of decades of full Israeli sovereignty over the West Bank and the settlements will be guaranteed and will be carried out by him. And now, all of a sudden, this agreement really puts it aside, really suspends the option of an annexation. They feel very betrayed, but we have to say the settlers have been betrayed politically by Netanyahu many times in the past. They have been saying that they were betrayed by Netanyahu politically many times in the past. And yet, when it comes to election day, when it comes to giving a recommendation on who will be the next prime minister, they always take a stand to his right. They always support him. And right now, if we look at the political map in Israel, it seems that there's no other alternative than Netanyahu for the settlers to support. So Netanyahu can pretty much go ahead and completely give up the annexation of the West Bank and still count on the settlers to support him come election day.
Now come stand. Ahdeya, first I will like to ask you, then I will ask similar question with Eddie. What I am looking at as that let it be Israel, UAE, Bahrain, or other countries to follow the same route. They are all the allies of United States of America. Then there is a hidden deal going on between Iran and China. So, in a larger geopolitical arena, are we looking at camping like American camp as well as Chinese camp? Because if Iran falls into the trap of China, then I think sooner or later Iraq will follow the same route. Then Lebanon may also follow the same way, maybe even Syria. So are we seeing a clear-cut line of demarcation between Chinese camp in future and American camp? And finally, India
I
will
don't,
also be there. So the
I don't
larger,
think the
if you go to the larger Indo-Pacific, it will go from United States to Japan to Horn of Africa, covering
I
the
don't think
Arabian
this.
Peninsula as well as yeah.
I don't think the Chinese-Iranian camp is going to be created. I think something is going to happen with the Iranian regime very soon. And I don't think that Iran can move towards the approach it has with China. From what we see, from what's happening in Iran these days, the people of Iran and how they are against what has been happening towards them for the past 41 years, let's hope that before the deals of the devils is made, let's hope that some change will happen in Iran, because you don't want to see these two camps against each other. Again, when we are signing peace agreements to come together, with China getting involved in Iran with something as huge as this, you don't want to see two strong camps. And if we want to speak bluntly about who is still stronger and who will remain to be stronger, it is the United States and its allies. No matter what Iran tries to do with China, we know that where the power is, where the military power is, we know where the political power is. We have seen some stances from Arab countries that show that they are inclined towards reconciling with the Gulf countries. Power now is on a different side. Iran is getting weaker and weaker. And one of the things that prove Iran's weakness is that, first of all, a few days ago, after we signed the agreement, they turned up and they threatened our leadership. And the Revolutionary Guard said that the people of Bahrain are going to be very vengeful about what happened towards the leaders. And these threats that are made have been made for 41 years, which have no value neither to us nor any other countries in the region. China, by tag teaming with Iran, is on the loser side. The Iranian regime is not going to stand for a long time. They will eventually end. And what we are doing now with the deals that we are signing, we are weakening the Iranian regime. We are weakening the Malali regime. And I see that in the next 2 years, there will be a major transformation in the Middle East. The Malalis can't be there. Iranian people are not accepting them anymore. 80% of that country's population have been born after the so-called Islamic Revolution. No, that camp is not going to be even allowed to be started. I don't think. I think there will only be one camp, and the strong camp is going to be the United States and its allies. And unfortunately, I'd like to say this. Unfortunately, the Iranian people are very kind people. They are not violent people. This is why for 41 years they couldn't even have strong resistance, because once 2 or 3 or 10 of their children die on the streets, they give up. And you can't blame them. A mother that loses a child, you can't blame her for protecting her children. Just a few days ago, the Iranians sentenced to death a sportsman, a wrestler. And I saw the video of his mother crying and saying how three of her children have been sentenced between the death sentence and life in prison. And she was talking about how one of her sons was tortured until and was forced to say that his brother had committed a crime. So I don't think the Iranians are going to take this for long. They are not going to go out to the streets. I think they will be supported by the Iranian resistance outside. They will bring change to their country with their own hands, with their own people who are outside. So this China thing, Iranian camp, I doubt it will happen. I'm an optimist,
Well,
right?
you as a India, we are friends of Israel, Gulf states, GCC states, and as well as with Iran. But we even I won't like that Iran going into there is a change in global order in favor of China, the world will be really an ugly one because China doesn't
Chaos.
bother about human rights. No, no, no. China is not a human country. Look what they have done with the Tibetans, how they are treating the Xinjiang people, especially the women of Xinjiang, how they are treating the Hong Kong people, what they are doing with in LAC line of actual control between India and China, what they are doing in the South China Sea. So Chinese change of global order is not in interest of anybody. The world will become really ugly if Chinese hegemony is there. And I am writing since very long time. You must have also read somewhere that world should also the Western world must be accommodative with Russia also because by putting sanctions upon Russia, you are pushing them in the lap of China. And Russia plus China is not a good combination for the global order. They should also West should also be accommodative to Russia, so that they are not pushing them towards China. And I have so many Russian friends. If you personally talk to them, they don't like Chinese basically, but they are being pushed to trade with them because of sanctions. So many sanctions upon Russians. So let's hope for the best. I'm also optimistic. I'm sure that even Western countries will understand not to push Russia much in the lap of China. And I was a little bit bothered because of the secretive deal between Iran and China. It is coming that it is 400 billion US dollar worth deal. So if such a deal is there, then definitely Iran will be under in the trap of China because China has
Yeah,
got a
for
very bad
25
record.
years.
Yeah,
Yes.
China has got a very bad record to whomever they give money and indebt the countries. Then they start making bases like they did with Sri Lanka,
I think this is happening all over Africa. This is happening all over
Africa,
Asia.
even
We are
in
seeing
yeah,
China taking over
all
these
over
countries.
Africa. With Nepal, they are doing the same. India has given
Very
a
true.
support of 1.5 billion dollar to Maldives to pay back the Chinese money. Otherwise, they would have trapped even Maldives. So this is the policy. So if there is some deal of 400 billion dollar, it is very bad for the entire region. I think so. So Eddie, what do you think about this geopolitics vis-a-vis China, Chinese camp, Iran, and US camp
Well,
in
I
the
think you're
Middle
very
East?
right. I think a Chinese backup to Iran would definitely ruin the international isolation in which Iran is in right now. And I think that the Iranian regime is really under a lot of pressure, something that is
Yes.
definitely in the interest of moderate Gulf countries and of Israel, whose biggest enemy is Iran and the different Shia groups all across the region. Chinese backup would completely ruin this isolation and bring Iran maybe back on track into becoming a bigger and bigger danger towards Israel. But however, I think it's a little bit hard to predict how exactly will that unfold. We do know that Israel had some negotiations with China that have to do with big infrastructures in Israel. We know that the United States tried to prevent that from happening. But I think what's interesting to see is really how the camps are starting to align within the Middle East. Processes that have been going on for years now are all of a sudden accelerating. One of them, and the main one that we're seeing right now in the deal being signed, is Israel joining the moderate Sunni countries to one front. This is a front that includes the moderate Sunni countries from Egypt through Jordan to Saudi Arabia to different Gulf countries. Now Israel is really joining it, as I think there is a really wide realization of how dangerous is Iran and the Shia groups to the prosperity of the Middle East. The other front is, of course, Iran, the different Shia groups, such as Hezbollah, which is the most immediate threat to the security of Israel, and maybe the biggest threat today in Israel, and the biggest military force that Israel had to deal with during the last few decades. And one third front that is emerging, and now we're starting to see it getting closer to the Shia group, is the extreme Sunni front. That includes Turkey and Qatar. These are countries that support the Muslim brotherhoods all across the Middle East and even beyond. Wherever there is a conflict that includes extreme Muslims, we can see Turkey and Qatar involving in funding, in supplying
You will
military.
soon find Pakistan there also with that.
In Pakistan, in Libya,
Yes.
even in Yemen, we are seeing them entering more and more. And just a few days ago, we heard the Iranian
Pakistan
president
is also now
for Turkey.
unofficially a member of Iran, Turkey, all that gang. I don't call them group, gang.
Gang is definitely the right word, as these countries really use proxies and terror organizations all across the Middle East, from al-Hashd al-Sha'bi in Iraq to take over the country, through ISIS in different areas, which is interesting because these two are rival groups. However, the countries that give them the backup are joining powers. And we heard the Iranian President Rouhani just a few weeks ago calling Turkey to get together and be the representatives of the Ummah, the Islamic nation, against this process of normalization. I think this is something that moderate Sunni countries understand how dangerous it is, and would definitely encourage Israel to get closer to them. That is besides the point that there are a lot of other common interests between Israel and different Gulf countries. If you read the Abraham Accords to its fullest, it's very detailed, and there are a lot of different parts about cooperation, agriculture, energy, water. It really goes on and on. But Iran and these extreme Shia groups are definitely there too. And the security cooperation, I think, is maybe the most interesting enigma in this agreement, because obviously most of the details are still secret, and it can really develop into something very interesting in the upcoming years.
You know, being in India, we think sometimes that geopolitically we live in a very complicated geographical area when geopolitics is there. But when I talk with my friends in the Middle East, we live in a very peaceful area. I get the feeling that South Asia is much more peaceful. So I will like to give some time to the newly made friends, the Bahrainis and Israelis, to talk among yourself if you have some question with each other. And you want to ask something to your Bahraini counterpart?
Yes, I'm a little curious about I think the public opinion in Bahrain, and specifically what do Bahrainis feel about the Palestinian issue and the Palestinian cause? Is it really alive in the public discussion in Bahrain? Do you think it really affects the political discussion and the steps that the government takes?
I can't hear you properly. Give me a second, please. I think
Sure.
my Bluetooth got disconnected. Just a second. Again, the question, please.
I was
He's
wondering,
asking-
can you hear me?
Go on.
I can hear you. Yes.
Wonderful. I'm wondering, how dominant is the Palestinian issue and the Palestinian cause among the Bahraini public and the political discussion in Bahrain? How much does it consist of the Palestinian issue? Is it dominant? Does it affect the politics?
Can you see me? I can hear you, but
No.
I'm not sure.
I could see you just a second ago. Now I can't see you.
But we can hear you.
Yeah.
Hear me. Nothing on. Not. Palestinian issue remains to be a priority when it comes as an issue, an Arab cause, when it comes to basic principles and beliefs. And let's not forget that the previous generations, their mindset is different than the current generation. Previous generations have been brought up to look at this issue that there is no gray area in it. It's either black or white. The generation today, the youth of today are different, of course. The Palestinian cause is a very important cause, but we had a very important statement issued internally in Bahrain a few days ago. And it was a statement made by Bahrain's Minister of Interior. And the statement was very clear. It said that you will always consider Palestine our Arab cause, but let's not forget that our main cause is Bahrain. Now, under that sentence, I will put 100,000 lines because no matter what is your priority end of the day is your country. Now, this is something you cannot change. For 7 decades, our nations have supported the Palestinian cause. This is a fact, and the Palestinian authorities can never deny that. But what did in 7 decades? What happened? The result was there was nothing that we can say that was a positive result after so much support. If we go back to President Anwar Sadat and how he initiated peace, if we go back to where the deal was during the time of President Sadat and where we are today, we are so much in the back. And the Palestinian leaders didn't help in any way, and they get insulted and offended when we say that your leaders didn't solve the problem. For decades, our countries have been supporting them financially, and this is something we obviously have to do with any country that is suffering. It's a human cause, but we haven't seen any result. The people of Bahrain hold a lot of love and respect. This is an Arab country, and this looking at it as a human issue. They have a lot of respect for that, and they will continue to support the Palestinians. But the people of Bahrain also want to have a relationship with Israel. Losing 7 decades of negotiations that haven't resulted in anything doesn't mean that I have to be Israel's enemy for the rest of my life. Israel was never my enemy. Let me sit on a table and discuss with Israel what can be done. Why not sit and talk? Why not, through these talks, build a better future for the Palestinian youth themselves, for Israel itself, for Bahrain and UAE and all the region's youth? Let's not forget that the peace deal is going to involve a lot of experience that we can exchange. United Arab Emirates has had many achievements when it comes to space. Let's not forget the defense deals that can be made when it comes to artificial intelligence. Israel is so much ahead of many other countries, so there will be a lot of things to benefit from. And these things, we're not going to use it against the Palestinians. These issues are going to be used also to protect the rights of the Palestinians. What upsets me a lot is when I saw the flags of Bahrain and the United Arab Emirates and the pictures of our leaders being burnt by people in Palestine. And I always understand people when they are emotional, but I don't understand that how could some people delete everything that our countries have done to support the Palestinian cause and overnight think that we have changed our ethics or our principles. We are a sovereign nation. It's my right to have peace deals with other countries. But what happened was very offensive. I don't want to generalize and say everyone did it. The people who did that it was a very coward move that made us as Bahrainis feel that I remember when we were children, they used to ask us to donate something for the Palestinian cause. And as now I grow older and I look at that picture and see the pictures of my king being burnt, and I feel so sad and disappointed. Again, I'm not generalizing and saying everyone did it. You can never generalize. But some people who did that, it was a very disappointing act from them. And Bahrain and UAE have always supported different causes, have always been there to aid people in trouble. And to see that happening was very sad and disappointing. Again, what I want to affirm is that Bahrain's stances towards the Palestinian issue remains to be the same. We are protective of them and of their rights, but we also have the right to talk about how we can contribute towards protecting them. For 7 decades, we left it to the Palestinian leaders. Today, we want to have a bigger role to play in the Middle East. We are sovereign nations. We are strong countries. So why should we just be monitoring what's happening between the Palestinian leaders and Israel when we can do the talking ourselves?
I think it is better. It's a good approach, and it will lead to some kind of peace. I'm also optimistic because we are from the land of Gandhi. So we wish to see peace everywhere. And we are friends of Israel. with Bahrain, Saudi, all the GCC countries, UAE, even Palestine and Iran. So we want to that peace should be everywhere, and we wish the same. Ahdeya, do you want to ask something from your Israeli counterpart?
Well, I want to ask Eddie. I want you guys to see my face. I don't know why you can't see
No,
me.
we can't see. Unfortunately, we
Can
can't see.
can I call again and maybe I will get you?
Try to switch the camera. I think maybe the camera is on the wrong end, or there's something cover it. Look for a small icon that has a lens and two arrows around it. Try to click it. Maybe that would help.
He's a more technically updated guy.
Wait,
No, the
allow
other one.
incoming
Two icons
video.
which are similar.
Just a second. No, I can't see it. My camera here. No,
But you can ask.
I
Should
We
can
can
be
hear
ask.
you. Yes, you can ask.
See, what role can we play as bring the people of together? We really need that because what I feel is that on the level of on the level of leadership and governments, a lot of things are being done. But what we need now is to prepare people. These hard feelings that people have been carrying for such a long time, how can we dissolve these feelings? If the older generation is hopeless, what can we do for the younger generation? Because I know the impact the youth can have on their families. I don't like seeing people in my country being bitter about other people. So I'm in my late 40s. I don't have that bitter feeling. People of my generation don't have that bitter feeling. So what can we do? You guys, how can you help us establish ties among people? How can we get people to interact? Shall we start it among journalists ourselves? What can we do?
Well, I think you're very right that in the high ranks, there's already a cooperation that includes a political cooperation, a diplomatic cooperation. A lot of business is going to be engaged between the different countries. And really, the big question is the public opinion, and the two peoples who are living their daily lives. And eventually, their main contact to what's happening outside of their country is the news that they see or read. And I think that in this spot, we as journalists have a very big role in giving access to people who were never in contact with each other, who never had an opportunity to hear or see each other, to really maybe get to know each other a little better. I think even to the level of just producing content from both countries and giving access to your own public about this country could be very effective. And it really runs to all different sorts of content. If we as journalists cover, I'm talking about myself as an Israeli-based journalist, if I cover Bahraini politics, if I cover Bahraini social processes, if I cover Bahraini culture and social life and show it to the Israeli public, then all of a sudden the Israeli public and the young generation can realize that the other side is quite similar to it and understand what's keeping the Bahraini people out on the street busy every day. And the contrary works as well. If you as a Bahraini journalist have access to the Israeli public and you can talk to influencers, to social media stars, to different artists or figures that have to do with the everyday life in Israel, not even politicians or businessmen, and show that side of Israel, the everyday life, the culture, the tourism side of Israel to the Bahraini public, I think that's a start. And I really think that web influencers and social media influencers are a key component in that, because I think the two publics have a lot in common, and this is some sort of a link that will help to show this content. I think a lot of Israelis are very interested in Arab culture generally. And if, for example, they will have access to what's going on in Bahrain, even language-wise, to learn Bahraini slang or Bahraini terms, it would make a lot of interest in the Israeli public in Bahrain, and that could really develop this furthermore. We have two peace agreements between Israel and its neighbors, in Egypt and Jordan. I think very few of my friends have been to Jordan and Egypt themselves, and nobody from Jordan and Egypt almost comes to Israel. It's a very cold sort of peace. And yet there is a lot of interest in Israel in the Arab world. And I think that this is a really big opportunity to finally meet personally with the Arab world. And we as journalists can have the opportunity to give the first connection between these two publics and really make it accessible through the media and through the news.
You are right,
I
Eddie.
like that. Yeah, I like that because I feel, help me switch on this camera. There is an icon that gives me back thingy. Maybe my camera's on the other side or something. I don't know. Okay, I'm trying to, but it's not working.
Is there an
Maybe I have
icon of
to.
camera on your screen?
On my screen, there is an icon on the right, and when I press it, nothing comes out. Uh, yeah, I get, the camera back front thingy.
Yeah. Yeah, no, we
Um,
can see that there's a problem with it.
yeah, I think I have a problem.
Yeah, I think maybe you
Yeah.
should just recall the conversation.
Shall I? Yeah.
I think, Doctor, will it be difficult technically if she hangs up and recalls?
I think so.
Yeah.
I
Really?
think
Okay,
it
then
will
let's
be.
stay. Let's stay then.
But
Okay, what
what
I
Eddie was saying, I too believe that Ahdeya, because I have seen in case of India, we are having very good public-to-public connection with Israelis. We are having very good public-to-public connection with Russians, and that leads to results more than the government to government communication or diplomatic ties. They have a limit, but this is limitless when people to people contact is there, when there is a contact between two cultures, when there is contact between people in terms of business, in terms of cultural exchanges, in terms of school exchanges. So that definitely result in positive energy everywhere. And I wish that Bahrain, UAE, and Israel, they will also enjoy that type of people to people contact.
I think connection
uh
between universities and schools is very important as
Yeah,
well and can really develop this.
I totally agree because what I sense from people here is a lot of welcoming, a lot of willingness to start relations on the human level, on public people to people level. I did not expect to see that response so quickly, and I felt that it could be challenging to get people to express how they feel. And no, I see very, very good signs. People, of course, when you see people joking about something, I know the people of my country, when they start saying next summer in Bahrain, and they have pictures of Israelis on the streets. They have photoshopped it, and they say next summer in Bahrain, this is how Bahrain will look. And then they keep on sending jokes about next summer we'll be in Tel Aviv. Trust me, when people use jokes in their language and with a smile, it actually shows their intention. I know the people of my country, I know their nature. When they start doing that, it means that they are psychologically prepared. I didn't see
prepared.
any animosity. I didn't see the
Yeah,
only animosity I faced was from members of the Muslim Brotherhood on my social account medias and from
okay.
extremists whose faces were exposed in 2011, who were trained by Hezbollah and Iran and Syria. These were the people who have had negative comments, but the people who are moderate and who are liberals, on the contrary, I have seen amazing feedback. I think the only thing ruining it for us now is the coronavirus. I think if the COVID-19 wasn't there, probably in the next couple of weeks after signing aviation agreements or whatever needs to be signed, I would expect the flights to Tel Aviv would be full.
Let me end with one saying that once the Wuhan virus is over, you will find love in the air.
I like that. I like that.
So it was really great talking to you guys, and I'm hopeful that we will have lasting peace in the Middle East, and India is all for peace. And together we will make this world even better place to live. Thank
Of
you guys
course,
for
Doctor.
joining
Thank
us,
you for your effort.
Thank you
Eddie,
so much for
Doctor,
having
and
us.
amazing.
lots
And
of love from India to Israel as well as Bahrain.
thank you. And Ahdeya, I would also love to keep contact between us. This could be one of the first contacts between journalists in the two countries. I think it would be very interesting.
And she is president of Journalists Association of Bahrain. So I think she is the right person to be in touch.
No doubt.
Okay, guys. Bye bye.
Goodbye. Thank you very much.